Hi, welcome to this course, the third module in the plantain farming course, site selection and farm setup. In this module, we'll be addressing the key principles for land selection, preparation, and farm layout. In simple terms, it means what you need to do in setting up your farm for a plantain farm. This course will help us understand the criteria for selecting the land suitable for plantain farming. We'll learn the proper techniques for preparing the land for plantain and understand the principle of farm layout, spacing and intercropping for optimal plantain yield. What is the importance of proper site selection? The yield of your plantain is highly dependent on the quality of land and environmental condition. If you select a poor land, you would have poor yield and you will always have pest and disease issue that would increase your cost of production, increasing your cost at sale, leading to lack of market. And the correct site maximizes your productivity and ensure that the sustainability of your plantain farm is credible. Now let's talk about land selection criteria. Look for loamy soil, well draining, rich in organic matter and high in nutrient. What is organic matter? Organic matters are things that come naturally with soil. So these are usually soils that have had people live on them, dwell on them, there's some form of dungs in it and their level of growth already happening on the soil. Slightly acidic. Usually I always advise that you have your pH meter to always check for the range of the acidity of the land area which you are buying. Lastly, well drained soil. You see, you don't want to have a soil that logs water. Any soil that logs water will make your plantain stem to rot. So you want to look for a soil that once you pour water, it goes deep down. Also, you want to look at environmental and climatic condition. Like we mentioned in our previous video, make sure that the temperature is between 26 to 30. If it's less, it means you have to monitor how you add water to it, less water, and if it's higher, it means more water to it. Ensure that there is good rainfall. If there are not good rainfall, you need to have a source for water. And for humidity, please keep it at 70 for optimal growth. Other consideration, you may want to look at lands that are above sea level, but if this is something you're struggling to measure, stick to the climatic requirements. Now let's talk about drainage. Ensure that the soil drains water well, right? And avoid areas with poor drainage, like areas that are lowland. So by lowland, it means when rain fall, it will start from a high point and then end your farm is now at the lowland level of it, where all the water that comes stop there. It will lead to logging, and logging will make your plantain rot. We've already talked about the soil. Conduct soil test. Pick this your soil, check the pH, take it out. If you do not have your own pH meter, but I recommend as a farmer you have your pH meter. But if you don't have a pH meter, please measure or take that soil for soil test. Next thing is you want to prepare the nutrient requirement of your soil. So with a soil test, you can check for your N, P and K, which is nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. You would also check for magnesium and calcium. But if you had already used your pH scale to do this, then you need to take your soil for testing for these other nutrients. Dat nitrogen is what will help dat leaf to grow. The phosphorus will ensure dat the root is strong and the flower dat we need to fruiting will start. The potassium is what will help for the fruiting and the overall plant health, while the magnesium is what will ensure dat dat plant structure is strong for continuous yield. Usually you don have all of dis things, so e means dat wen you do your soil test, you den begin to add dis nutrient as at required. The first thing you do is root, so you want to start with an NPK with higher P. Over time, when you notice dat you have gotten to the point where you are now growing the leaf, you put your N and your P. At the point you start fruiting, You want to ensure that there's a lot of potassium. And once you notice that fruit and you want to put fertilizer, ensure that it's something that is big on magnesium and calcium. Alternatively, just do your manure compost. Go and create your compost by yourself so that you can improve your soil fertility. Do your compost on the land and mix your soil adequately. Another thing you want to check is that clearing of the land. Once you have identified this land, done the test, the next thing you want to do is clear this land. Remove all weeds, rock, debris to ensure that the plantain has space to grow, right? I would say look for mechanical or manual method. Manual method is people coming to clear. Mechanical means looking for a tractor driven a tractor clearing equipment or slashers. They're like smaller slashers you can use for small scale. Next thing is plow. What is plow? Plow is the part of turning the soil. So turn the soil well enough until to such that every big mold part of it is broken down. That way you give enough air for the soil, which allows for growth of the roots when you start planting. The next thing is create a drainage ditch. So as simple as the drainage ditch can be, please create a drainage ditch that ensures that water is not clogging around where you have planted. What is drainage? Drainage is space for water to pass. Somewhere that water can pass, that will slope away from the plant, right? Not the one that will slope into the plant, the one that will slope away from the plant. Then make sure that in a place where you know that your drainage is not so strong, ensure that you raise your bed, meaning make sure the bed is high so the plant is on top of it, so that when you pour the water, it just falls through the drainage. All of these things is to ensure that your soil is collecting air, receiving good air, and water does not log around it for it to rot. Now the next thing you want to think about is how do you control erosion, because if your plantain have too much of water, especially the earliest phase, or at any point it will rot. Think about terracing. There are three options that I have. First is terracing, second is cover crops, and third is mulching. On terracing is on sloping land, use the terracing techniques to reduce water runoff, right? So this has to do with you demarcating it well enough that they have steps and ranges. For cover crops, you want to think about planting things like legumes in between the rows of the plantain. So from one plantain to another plantain, you plant a legume crop there so that it can add to organic matter and fix the nitrogen into the soil that you need. The third part is mulching. So mulching is grass, looking for leaves and putting it around the base of your plantain so that it can reduce soil erosion and retain the soil moisture, especially after watering. Now let's talk about soil fertility management. You need to ensure that you put compost. Compost helps with your soil fertility. Go and take a course on how to create compost. Regularly test your soil as much as you can. In fact, they will say as a farmer, if you have money, every month put a test on your soil. If you don't have money, buy a test kit so that you can run your test whenever you come to the farm. Other things is that for you to avoid synthetic chemical, go and learn how to make organic fertilizer. I know Agrodemy has a course on that. You may want to check Agrodemy Academy for a course on how to create organic fertilizer. Then ensure that you are doing crop rotation to maintain like the soil health. So this is especially around the legumes that you are putting around these things. So rotate them so that the soil health can be steady, especially when you start seeing things like pests and disease. Now let's talk about spacing. When you want to space, you have to maintain 3 to 4 meters between rows to allow for sufficient light and sunlight and airflow. Don't forget that this thing will grow big and long, so you have to give it enough space to accommodate for the growth that is coming, so that they will not begin to tight themselves, because next thing you begin to see them do is shift for me, 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 and then it begins to bend. e begins to tilt towards where e feels like it's collecting more nutrients, and that's how you begin to have issues around plantain tree falls. Maintain good spacing. If you don't have good spacing, one will be growing, one will be dying, right? And ensure that each plant has enough space to grow without competition. So you see that shift for me is what makes it to bend. Shift for me, bend it. Shift for me, shift for me. And the next thing, the base of it becomes weak and we lose the quality. Your holes, make sure your holes are deep, not so deep, between 30 to 40 centimeter. Measure it please, please measure it, measure it, right? Dat hole, put well rotted manure to provide the plant with essential nutrients at the time of dat planting. Don't pity the manure you put there, put enough to last for dat crop, for the plantain. And you can begin to think about intercropping options for your plantain. So intercropping means involving other crops alongside the plantain so that you can improve your farm productivity. So some people think about beans, groundnut, they put it there. Some other people just put cassavas in between because they require similar condition. Other people just do cocoyam because cocoyam need shade so that the plantain leaf can become like the shade for cocoyam. Other people also try to do like vegetables, right? At the early stage of this plantain, you just put vegetables and pepper so dat you have something that you are harvesting out of the process while you are waiting for your plantain. What are the advantages of that intercropping? Is so that you can increase your farm productivity, maximize your land use. Don't forget that we are keeping spaces, enough spaces between them. But those small spaces, if veggies are there, they can grow maximally, right, without us losing the fact that we have kept too much space for our plantain to thrive. And the kind of nutrient that the vegetables are looking for and will not exactly fight with the ones that plantain is seeking for. Again, because you're continually planting there, you increase the soil fertility and you help control pests because those vegetables, some pests will not be able to thrive where those kind of vegetables are. So you will begin to have less vegetable, and most times dis vegetables and dis other crops you intercrop with it are repellent to those pests. So because dat they are there, the pests will not be able to thrive. The last part and the important part is that you begin to make money just before you begin to harvest your plantain because dis intercropped crop have shorter lifespan, so you can harvest and sell while you are waiting for your plantain. And it also reduces the financial risk. What is the financial risk? So for example, something happens and your plantain is not fruiting and you have to remove and start afresh. Because you have planted legumes around, you can as well sell your legumes and wedge against the failure or the loss you have made from planting, as against somebody who just planted only plantain and left it. So what is the assignment here? If you have a land, I need to start thinking about that land. Write out the things you need to check out on that land. Then also think about what makes that place an ideal location for you. Point that out in your document. Next thing, right? Ask yourself, how do you measure these holes on your farm? Then if you can, you can always share what this is to us in the assignment panel and we can look at it, or you can discuss within your community of learners how you can go about it. In summary, in this video we have addressed land preparation, what you should be looking out for climate wise, soil wise, fertility wise, how to even select the land, how to then prepare the land, how to now layer the farm and space it, and lastly we spoke about intercropping. Thank you and see you in the next class.